Hi, this is Paul. I'm going to be looking at a video that Chad made this morning. Now, Chad, of course, has the channel Friday Morning Nameless. Those of you who remember some of the hullabaloo over the German festival, not this year, but the year before, the change of the name. And many of you know Chad. He's a fixture here in the corner, and his channel has all of 467 subscribers. And I'm always have a little trepidation taking something from such a small channel and bringing it to my whole channel, and then I think, well, maybe I should put it in the Randos section, in the membership section, because then it gets less exposure, because there is something to the scale here. And of course, the video I made today, I used some of the just chatting from Grail Country, where Jacob sort of crossed the streams and came over into Grail Country. There's tensions. One of the interesting, I often tell people, the corner has corners, and there's sometimes tension between some of the different groups in the corner. And I don't see that actually as a problem. I see that as a feature, not a bug, because part of the reason that when I was just seeing that Luke was doing a live stream, which I often jump on, I saw Jacob on, I thought, oh, that's interesting. There's going to be tension here. And of course, and Chad kind of touches on that. And so let's, and Chad also touches on the John Vervaeke saying neither nostalgia nor utopia. And Chad wants to kind of push back on that. And I thought Chad had some really good things to say in this video, so I wanted to engage with it. One of the strange things about this little corner is that in some ways we've been using social media as a very strange telephone. We're having conversations with each other, sort of, but we're also having conversations with other larger things as we're having conversations with each other. So Chad will often just sort of pick this up in the middle of the day and share a few thoughts and put it on his channel, and then 50 or 100 people will see it. A few people will leave comments, and that's, when I think about that, it's sort of a, again, it's a community functioning, and to me, one of the most important and special things about this whole internet thing that I've been on for the last 6 years is this community.
Greetings and welcome to the Friday.
First I gotta get the sounds right. Let's try that again.
Greetings and welcome to the Friday Morning Nameless. I'm Chad the Alcoholic. Don't have a lot of time. I'm about to put this tile in the shower.
This phone gets really good, really good sound
on my job site. But I was on a quick break waiting for my mud to slag. If you want to know what that is, Google it or something. We actually have these tools called Google.
One of the things I love about this corner are the number of tradesmen who participate in this. It isn't just academics. It isn't just people who are. It's one of the beautiful things that happened is that I've got to today I'm going to release another Randos conversation. That one will probably come to the full channel too. Again, I've been putting out a lot of content right now. I know during the holidays, my time I have to do this kind of thing will probably slow down, and then I'm going to bring some of those Randos conversations to the full channel. So those of you who don't want to pay the $3 for the Randos section, many of them will come out. Not all of them, because again, some of them are probably more appropriate just with a group. One of the dynamics of a group is that there are borders to it. I've been listening to the Jonathan Peugeot Daily Wire thing, and again, there's almost nothing in there that you wouldn't have heard him say in other places. But boundaries and borders are important in terms of identity and cohesion and really having a group. So part of the reason why I like that little Randos section for $3 a month is it creates something. It creates something. And,
and we don't even, it's just so automatic. It's so funny. And I'm so grateful that we have that is Google or some mud on my job site. So, but I was on a quick break waiting for my mud to slag. If you want to know what that is, Google or something. We actually have these tools called Google, and we don't even, they're just so automatic. It's so funny. And I'm so grateful that we have the tools. What's on my mind is, this morning, Paul Vanderklay used a clip from the Grail Country Just Chatting stream hosted by Luke Thompson from yesterday morning, and it was a really great conversation. It's always a great conversation over there. I noticed that these robust conversations that are most meaningful, I noticed that they kind of move from spot to spot, maybe medium to medium, or let's say channel to channel. In other words, some of the best conversations I had early on were in the Discord on the voice chat rooms, and then it would eventually move from there to some of the Voxer conversations that we had, which weren't video, but they were audio. And then from there, kind of the whole while, there were these Randos conversations that were happening on Randos United, where a few people would get together and have a conversation on a particular topic, and they were really great. You can find some of those conversations on the Randos United channel that has, I don't know, maybe 600 or 700 subscribers, and it has videos. There are no live streams on it. Then there's obviously this other Randos live channel that has only live streams, and I'll get to that in a second. So it went from the Discord to like Voxer to then Paul Vanderklay started doing these Thief in the Night videos where he would...
Well, there's actually a few more steps in there, because one of the things I was playing on when I was on Bridges of Meaning quite a bit, I'm not on there hardly at all anymore, but if you're looking for a Discord community, I very much recommend them, and I try to keep the invitation link current down below here. And if it does get out of, because it lapses now and then when I get a request, oh, the link isn't working, then I'll put a new link in. But then we did the sort of shop thing where I would have a camera up in here, and we would watch each other work, kind of, and it was sort of a virtually not alone thing, similar to what Chad had done. There's a lot of really interesting experiments that happened in that first couple of years over at Bridges of Meaning. Part of my frustration with Discord is I don't like the format, and for a while I was talking to Rick and Joey and some of the guys who set up the Bridges of Meaning that took off was actually the second iteration of that Discord server. The first one never really took off. The second one took off, and then there were a lot of questions about the relationship between text versus voice and video chat, and so we talked about doing a server that had more locality to it, that would help people find each other, because the idea behind the launching of the Bridges of Meaning server was about, we want people to not only be able to get together online, but we want people to be able to get together in person. And that's because obviously in person there's more bandwidth, there's more reality, there's more of that 3P reality. So, what Chad's getting at is there's been evolution of this community over the last number of years, and that evolution has been happening in conjunction with technology. We talk about AI, we talk about algo. Grim wanted me to do a video on, basically doing a little bit of connection between, let's say, principalities and powers and algo. of course, we had the conversation about egregores and algorithms. So there's very much something happening that is spiritual and it's technological, and what Chad is reflecting on is sort of the evolution of the corner with respect to all of the different tools that we've been using.
Do kind of like the format of the Friday morning Q&A, Bridges of Meaning Q&A, but instead of it just being him, he would open up the room, the Discord room, and other people would drop in and we would have these conversations.
So when we first started doing the Friday morning Q&A on Bridges of Meaning Discord, I would be on the Discord itself. At that point, Rick didn't have a day job, and so Rick would be with me here at church, and he would sort of manage all of the technical stuff, because it was a little complex on Discord to have it actually go well. And but part of the reason I wanted to do that instead of just sort of the standard Q&A format was that it's much more fun to have someone ask a question and then talk to them. And I can do some of that on StreamYard, but part of the reason I'm doing that on StreamYard now is because Rick has his day job, and it's technically a little bit easier.
Very estuary-like conversations. It wasn't long after that. I think Paul went on went to Europe, and we didn't hear from him for a while because he was busy. And Jacob Federacci started doing these StreamYard streams called Just Chatting, and I remember when they first came up, nobody was really attending to them. It was just Jacob in there, kind of sitting by himself, and then one day, I don't remember what day or which stream it was, people started to join, and the conversation started to become really rich, and it was really, really robust and lush and just great, very meaningful. And then it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then a conversation started to sprout up about leadership, and then it started to become kind of and this is of course my opinion, but they started getting a little yicky. Although
now Chad, one of the interesting things about this in temperament, of course, is part of what was interesting yesterday about having Jacob over in Grail country is that I knew there was going to be conflict, because Jacob brings conflict, and I don't think conflict is in itself a bad thing. Conflict is sometimes a necessary thing, but people temperamentally have different. I think it's in the big five, it's the agreeableness. Some people really don't like conflict. Jordan Peterson talks about this often, how he really doesn't like conflict, even though he's a lightning rod for it, and sometimes setting it up himself. But some people really don't want conflict. They want a sense of, they don't want conflict. Other people want conflict, and again, it's interesting the way that these tools and the algorithms sort of look for that. Conflict tends to produce engagement. Conflict tends to produce attention, and all of this is really a lot about attention.
There were still good conversations. They were peppered with some of this icky contention, which is not something I really enjoy listening to or engaging in. But so then from there, what ended up happening was other people started adopting this StreamYard tool and having their own Just Chatting. And then Grim Grizz started to do this. He was doing his Virtually Not Alone show, and he would invite people in to do these conversations. And then Paul started doing it more with the StreamYard thing. And then Grail Country started to do their own StreamYard thing. And
I should say that part of the reason I was doing those Thief in the Night videos was once the channel gets to a certain size, it's tougher and tougher to sort of get the kind of engagement I really like, which, again, part of the reason I keep doing the Randos conversations is I want novelty. And I don't want, and there's a sense in which all of this AI stuff is really bad at novelty. because it's crowdsourced, and it's feeding off sort of the attentional machinery. And that's why, I really like small channels, and I really like meeting new people. And kind of the best of both worlds is, which this channel provides me, is meeting new people who are already up to speed on the stuff we're talking about. And that's where, Jordan Peterson at the Ark was talking about subsidiarity. Now, that has a very specific understanding in Catholicism, and I don't think Jordan is necessarily leveraging everything that's in Catholic subsidiarity, but he's, I think, pointing to the fact that what you really want are clusters of communities, in some ways nested in hierarchies. And that's sort of what we've been building slowly in the corner. And to me, that's a really cool thing. And part of what happens, this week I've been releasing a lot of these videos, these clips from Randos conversations. Well, why am I doing that? Well, again, I'm continuing to play with these tools to try to get a sense of what I can accomplish with them. Well, what do I want to accomplish? I want to continue to sort of feed the process that has been happening fairly organically over the last 5 years. A number of the people early in sort of got in on the ground floor, and you can see them. I mean, Sam has his channel. Karen has her channel. Some people had started, and we found them and picked them up along the way, like Sevilla. Chad has his channel. Grim Grizz has his channel. Jacob has his channel. Others have channels too. Paul Anleitner. And some of the channels are, decent size, getting up above the 1,000 mark so they can be monetized, and a few thousand. I mean, Paul Anleitner's channel. He had an existing podcast before too, so that's a little different. And he's done a lot of good work on his channel. So his channel's up over 5,000. That's a decent size. But one of the things that people often don't understand is that these subscription numbers in YouTube don't exactly mean what they sort of mean. If you see a big number, it means something, but figuring out exactly what it means, especially in terms of what it can build and what it can build long term, is actually super difficult. And someone might have a small channel, but their significance in a community is very important. And someone might have a large channel, but have relatively little impact. And this is especially true over time, because one of the things that if you read history closely, you discover that there were people who were popular in certain periods whose name you'll never recognize because they've been completely forgotten. And the names that you do recognize from that period might have been relative unknowns in that period. What words to use? These spirits are very interesting agents in this arena. So I got a Twitter DM from one of the producers of the Sacred podcast. I had some of the John Vervaeke interview. That was a terrific interview. These guys over at the Theos think tank are really doing a good job. Elizabeth Oldfield, I used a clip of her from Justin Brierley. Justin Brierley has his own channel, and he had Glenn Scrivener and Elizabeth Oldfield to talk about the Ayaan Hirsi Ali news that had happened. And then somebody from the Theos think tank contacted me and said, "Oh, by the way, we had Jonathan Peugeot on." I knew they knew that, and I said, "But is it on YouTube?" No, it's only on the podcast. And so, because my channel is a certain size and because I have a certain place in this conversation, there are certain people who sort of want to colonize me a bit, and I don't know if that was their motivation or anything like that, but it was the conversation that she had with Jonathan Peugeot was really very good. Again, it's November 2022 that they did it, so it's a year ago, over a year ago now. But she's really sharp, and she's coming at this Boy, this stuff is so interesting. She's coming at this from a different position. And well, let's just play this because this gets into what Chad is sort of knocking on the door about here.
I sense that the winds are changing, that there is suddenly... I've always been this sort of strange, token out Christian in ideas-y spaces. And I wrote about it recently for Unheard, the number, and they are almost entirely men, of people sidling up to me and going, suddenly this Christianity thing looks more interesting than I thought it was. From the left and the right. And the left is very driven by ecological crisis and fear, and a sense that actually they thought if they threw themselves at the project with enough love and hard work, they could fix it. And the like...
That touches on what I noticed about the McGill Christopher Vakey Smachtenberg thing, that, and I'll be touching on that in my rough draft for Sunday this week too, because the left has a ton of this emissary energy in it, and I think the left has so much of that emissary energy in it because they have taken the preeminent position in the culture. And I think part of that emissary energy is, well, once you are on top of the hierarchy, once you have the power, you tend to believe you can do anything. It's sort of the rich man's curse that once someone becomes wealthy or successful, they think they know everything because they're successful. They've kept winning and they've had the experience of winning, so they're just going to keep winning. And again, for me, that's part of the reason that I like talking to people who don't win because they're much more humble. And truth be told, if you pay attention and listen to them, you can learn something. And to talk sort of about this spirit of urban monoculture similarity, so many successful people all say the same thing because their hierarchies are all bound up.
Disappointment and horror, and almost entirely men, of people sidling up to me and going, suddenly this Christianity thing looks more interesting than I thought it was. From the left and the right. And the left is very driven by ecological crisis and fear, and a sense that actually they thought if they threw themselves at the project with enough love and hard work, they could fix it. And the like disappointment and horror and exhaustion is just bringing them to a place of like, is there something I can surrender to? You know, is there something bigger than me and our failures? And then on the right, it's coming from a different thing, and I think much more driven by this sense of a meaning crisis and institutional crisis and isolation and breakdown. And some of it does overlap with the cluster of thinkers that you have found yourself part of. And I was thinking as I was prepping this interview, I don't even know how to describe it. So I'm gonna, you're doing a seminar on scripture with Jordan Peterson right now, somewhere in America. There is a cluster of commentators that have been in conversation together very visibly over the last, say, 5 years. And some, they get, there was this phrase, the intellectual dark web, thrown around a few years ago. And that, how do you describe?
Now, I think this actually is pretty important for many of us. A video like this, when I make videos, I have an understanding, or I have a hunch, generally speaking, of how many people are going to listen to it and who the people are that are going to click on it. And sometimes I make thumbnails that are designed to sort of broaden the community, like the thumbnail I made on Ash's talk, where he tells basically how he became a Christian by being interested in this Scandinavian, Norwegian, Egyptian blonde. And I thought, I'm going to have fun with this thumbnail. Other thumbnails, like the ones for the video today, which is basically the collage of faces, that thumbnail isn't really going to attract a lot, but the subject in it is going to be more more in-house. And it's just interesting listening to her stumbling upon, now of course Jordan Peterson is the biggest name in the corner, and then after that Peugeot, and then Vervaeke. So there's going to be a lot of, depending on just how big the exposure is to the outside world and how intelligible you are, and to a certain degree how much conflict is around you, you'll get a certain degree of attention. I know that making that thumbnail about Nash's conversion story with the blonde, a bunch of people will click on that because they'll see the blonde and then they'll see these two dudes just talking, telling a story, and they'll click off pretty quick, and then Algo will see the number of people clicking off pretty quick, and then it'll sort of downgrade the video. And so those videos tend to they go up real fast and they tend to go down fairly fast. But I make them because a certain percentage of people will have read the title, and those videos are kind of like me fishing for men, and that's often men, but some women too, in terms of finding others who might want to play in our corner and might fit into this. Grim Grizz always calls it kind of a flotilla of channels. Find their space, find their corner in the corner, find their niche, and find a place to grow and have community and engage with ideas and ask questions and do all of this stuff.
The conversations that you find yourself part of and what has emerged in the last few years around that. I don't want to label it for you.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think there has been a radical shift that has happened, and it's something. It really is like a Kairos moment, and there's no other way to say it. You know, I don't think anybody's completely responsible for it. I think it's also a pattern of a societal pattern.
And that's, in a sense, what Chad is getting at. This thing has been moving, and it moves through different tools, and it moves through different people. And there's churn, so some people get in for a little while, and then they get out. And some people stick with it, and they, sometimes they get frustrated, and they leave for a while, and they wander back. I saw that Carl left a comment again, and some of you know who Carl is.
And where you reach breaking points. The new atheists were the last wave of secularism, but that wave was so stupid. Like the new atheist, the new atheist argument is so pathetic that it's almost as if you make Christianity and religion so stupid and idiotic and ridiculous that then any glimmer of pattern that appears will look like a miracle to people. And it's like there's actually a lot more than that, folks. So Jordan Peterson is, I think,
now I'm going to jump onto the Justin Brierley video. When Jonathan talked about the new atheists, I could not forget. This is probably my favorite moment of this video.
More sort of critique. There were lots to choose from, but this is Stephen Woodford.
The woman in this is Elizabeth Oldfield, so you can't see her obviously in the audio-only podcast.
And he goes online very often as Rationality Rules. He again is featured in a previous episode of this podcast. This was essentially Stephen saying, well, why did you have to claim to suddenly be a Christian, Ayan? Weren't there other options on offer? Here we go.
Look, if
Glenn can't almost stop laughing right away because he knows how this is going to be.
Ali really wants solidarity and shared values, are there not better ways of achieving this? Wouldn't it be more inclusive and sensible to promote, say, civic national values, freedom, equality and democratic government, to name just a few? Or perhaps, why not just be a humanist? Or, champion Enlightenment values. Enlightenment values, like religions, transcend nations. They unite people across the globe who don't even share a language. They are much like religion in this sense.
So I can see you chuckling away at that, Glenn. I'll go to you first, because I did feel like Stephen's critique here, it was rather like a tweet sent out immediately in the aftermath of Ayan's article by Steven Pinker, who said, the brave and brilliant Ayaan Hirsi Ali is one of my heroes, but I disagree with her here. the alternative to theistic morality is not atheism, but humanism, the use of reason to enhance human flourishing. And, you know, Stephen says some pretty similar things in that critique. Glenn, go ahead.
As though she's never tried that. As though that's not like the middle section of her story. Like Act 1, Islamism. Act 2, secular humanism. Act 3, Christianity. Like she spent a long time kind of looking for this kind of stuff. And a lot of her article and a lot of her interviews are completely about how to identify the Enlightenment as the root is to misidentify the root. That is not the root. That is one distorted fruit of one part of one tree. The root needs to go a lot deeper and back to Christianity. And the idea that pure rationality is the root of this international rights-based order is just a nonsense. But I think one thing that this moment shows, I have no idea about Ayan's Christianity, and I have no idea whether there is a turn towards Christianity in the West at the moment. But I think this moment does show the failure of the new atheism, the failure of a worldview that says rationality rules, because rationality clearly does not rule, either from a spiritual religious standpoint or even just from an evolutionary standpoint. Like very obviously religion is.
So I probably won't have enough time to get all of these videos in, but.
And a pragmatist, so I think Christianity works better. Christianity has better outcomes
than
the alternatives.
All of them?
No, most of them. I think that there's a small number of people that can handle atheism, and I know all of you. And I'm friends with all of them.
Okay, here we are. Where are
this was a fascinating video.
Humanism.
So easy.
Move. Wow.
The question is, Christianity is a better bulwark against woke than humanism, and Michael Schellenberger has strongly agree, and Michael Sherman says disagree.
Wow, really? Okay, grab the board. Okay. Grab the board. Wow, right out of the gate. Okay, write down your best reason for believing.
And Shermer has no idea what Schellenberger is thinking, and Schellenberger, basically Shermer has to say, oh, he said my objection better than I did. And that's sort of where this is going, that the new atheism and this cult of rationality has been tried and found wanting.
It's kind of flipped about what Christianity is not doing as opposed to what secularism is doing, which I think is, I like what he said better than what I wrote.
You like his answer better than what you have?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you another opportunity to guess what he has on the board. Like,
Well,
why would someone believe that?
I will come up with sort of a political Christianity.
Okay.
That is to say, it's organized enough to push back against the woke movement, to actually boots on the ground, do something about it.
Is what he said correct?
No.
Okay. Can you please share your answer with him?
Sure.
What is it?
Should I read it?
Yeah.
Because the decline of Christianity resulted in the nihilism that led to wokeism.
What do you?
That's pretty good, actually. Yes, that's a testable hypothesis. Okay.
Okay. So before we make that claim, I'm going to grab this from you.
Sure.
Can you please show him your answer?
Yeah, mine is Christian. I didn't write it very well. Christianity is not universal ethics to include all people, and it's too, what I really meant to say. It's too divisive. It's too judgmental. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go over that one in a second. I'm going to grab this.
And what's so funny to me is that so many of these guys are responding that it's like 2005 is calling and they're asking for their answers back. You've worn them out and they no longer work.
The decline of Christianity resulted in the nihilism that led to wokeism. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, move.
On this one.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I'll move this way a little bit.
Okay, so if you slightly disagree with that, Is that consistent with the position of you
I
being
may
on?
even go one more because,
Okay.
because I happen to be a moral
Anyway, I don't have a lot of time. The whole video, especially the first half of the video, was interesting, where they were specifically talking about Christianity, and the teaser has it, as Jonathan Peugeot is about to say in this video, it's science is abandoning this sort of thin rationalism, because, and actually at the end of the first episode of Peugeot's, he basically lays out the case that rationalism is always situated within basically a worldview. Rationality is functions within the larger sphere, which is a worldview, which is basically what a lot of presuppositionalism has been saying for a very long time.
Is a human universal and must be adaptive and must have great utility to the human point. The failure of a worldview that says rationality rules, because rationality clearly does not rule, either from a spiritual religious standpoint or even just from an evolutionary standpoint. Like very obviously, religion is a human universal and must be adaptive and must have great utility to the human species. And very clearly, our minds have not evolved purely to have rationality ruling as grand emperor over the human person. Evolutionary psychology would teach you that rationality does not rule. Our minds are not rational. Our minds are righteous, as moral philosopher and moral psychologist Jonathan Haidt would sort of say. And so this idea that all we need is this transnational enlightenment value thing, it's not transnational. And surely the 9/11 wars, the wars in the wake of 9/11 kind of proved that what is natural and obvious and universal and what we consider to be inevitable human values are very particular, contingent Western values that have a history to them and an incredibly Christianized history to them. And Ian understands this, and I don't think Alex and Stephen do understand this. And therefore, I think she is following the evidence where it leads, and I think she is baffling people like Stephen and Alex, which to me shows the limitations of the new atheism.
Elizabeth, your thoughts on that way of seeing things? Pinker saying, come on, you've got humanism for all the things that you think. I mean, what is someone like Pinker or Stephen Woodford missing? Because obviously, as Glenn said, for Ayan, she tried that and it didn't work, presumably. Why do they think she's just sort of gone off on a crazy tangent here?
I was on a program recently with Daniel Dennett, and this was one of the things I was trying to kind of tease out in my conversation with him. Honestly, I think what they're missing is at least half of what it means to be a human being. More than half. I think that you can have aspirational values, which almost all of us would align with, but without embodiment, without community, without ritual, without what the Jesuits would call formation, it is almost impossible to live by them. And leaving God out of the equation briefly, I don't want to entirely, but even if you are someone like the critics that we've heard, you can want us to embody Enlightenment values and surely be able to see how almost impossible that is on our own, using air quotes, pure reason. How much to grow in our ability to make good decisions, to grow in wisdom, to really treat other people as if they are equal. I mean, who does that? to really make the decisions that are for the good of other people as well as us, even just our spouses, even just our friends, that without a rigorous moral and spiritual path, those things are just hot air, honestly. And that is what I think that Ayan is seeing. That she's not. I think she's not sure whether what she thinks about Jesus, what she thinks about God, but she knows she needs more than just like a value statement on a corporate wall.
Yeah, let's go.
This is good. More than a value statement on a corporate wall. Okay, we're sort of nesting our way through this thing.
I think is for sure largely part of that. Jordan Peterson appears on the scene and then starts to talk about religion through perception in the very similar way. That's why I'm friends with him, is because we were already talking in many very similar ways through this notion of attention, right? The inevitability of attention, the inevitability of patterns, and all of a sudden he really made the new atheists put them on the defensive in ways that we had never seen. And so it changed the landscape. And so now people are far less aggressive about their anti-religious speaking, and it's very difficult for them to be as aggressive as we kind of see things also fall apart around us. It's like, okay, well, all right, we did what you said. We created this secular world, and now...
And that point that they're less aggressive is really noticeable, because when you listen to Alex O'Connor or Rationality Rules, that they're saying the kinds of things, and Peter Boghossian is the poster child for this. They're saying the kind of things that 15 years ago you never would have heard from them. And whether, of course, sort of Rationality Rules is sort of on the atheism plus side of things, on the woke atheism side. And of course, Peter Boghossian's on the anti-woke atheism side. And you hear Michael Schellenberger, who says, basically, I'm an existentialist. I'm a pragmatic existentialist. I'm not a Christian. But when I look at this debate, the Christians won. It's basically what he says. Now, for him, it's not gripping. But for her, well, we can go back to that. So Justin plays something that I've played often on the channel, so I'll just skip through it.
I'm going somewhere.
Elizabeth, be interested in your thoughts on what Ayan had to say about that personal journey.
Yeah, I just have a little cry here. Yeah. Oh, the power of testimony, right? Like that. It was so interesting to me how she framed that, and it speaks so much to that formation as a new atheist. You know, it's personal, so therefore I don't know if it will be useful. You know, all of this I think connects so interestingly with the Ian McGilchrist stuff about brain hemispheres. You know, the instinct to make things abstract and universal is really useful in some cases, and trips us up so much, because the most personal, the most particular is the most universal. And the phrase that's often used about the incarnation is the scandal of particularity. And, you know, you can dress it up however you like. And I think this, talking about the article and the civilizational stuff is all interesting, but that felt like the most honest thing, right? I was in despair, and now I'm not. Who doesn't want that?
Yeah. Glenn?
And Jesus Christ is the God I can believe in. And very often, if I'm talking to an atheist, and especially of the new atheist breed, I will kind of say, which God don't you believe in? And, you know, I got that line from Tom Wright, who, you know, would use it as chaplain of Worcester College at Oxford. He would say to a whole bunch of 19 and 20-year-olds, which God don't you believe in? And they'd stare at their shoes and not really know how to answer. And they'd end up describing some distant monster. And he would say, well, I'm an atheist as regards that God too. Can I tell you about Jesus? Can I tell you about the God who is revealed by Jesus? And the power of Jesus to convert people, the power of Jesus, when he is lifted up, he will draw all people to himself, he says in John chapter 12. And I think that's so hope-giving to just regular Christians, that just as we present Jesus, it doesn't have to be clever, but there is an attractiveness to Christ at the existential level. And I think that frames what Ayan meant at ARC when she said, you know, we don't have to get into the older debates about did God build the world in 6 days sort of thing. And people thought to themselves, is she therefore abandoning the idea of truth? And I don't think she's abandoning the idea of truth. I think she's just recognizing that it's related to those two other transcendentals of beauty and goodness. And she speaks much about, you know, the goodness and the fruit of Christian civilization, at least. But there's also that beauty element as well. Could you imagine a greater God than Jesus, who would come and stoop and serve and suffer and bleed and die for the world? Could you imagine that?
And change the moral imagination of the world. What's so funny is that now is beautiful, whereas, again, contextually, that was in some ways not beautiful. I mean, that's how Jesus colonizes the moral imagination.
The world, and now what? right? Now what now what? It's not working, guys. It's not better. So as to put them on the defensive in ways that we had never seen. And so it changed the landscape. And so now people are far less aggressive about their anti-religious speaking, and it's very difficult for them to be as aggressive as we kind of see things also fall apart around us. It's like, okay, well, all right, we did what you said. We created this secular world, and now what? Right? Now what? Now what? It's not working, guys. It's not better. So I think all of that is coming together. But I'm really, to me, it's such an exciting time. It's such an exciting time because, you know, I'll give you an example. Like I had a discussion recently with a wonderful conversation partner, John Vervaeke, who is a professor of cognitive science at the University of Toronto, and Jordan Hall, who's a businessman and is this high-level businessman and working on all these systems thinking and stuff. And we were talking about angels and demons, and it was absolutely normal. There was no cringe. Nobody was afraid. It was just like, these are the words that were given to us to describe these realities we're realizing are inevitable. And so why not you just use those words? Why are you trying to find new words for things that you're realizing are the same? And the same, I had a discussion with Don Hoffman, who's a cognitive science at University of California. And the same thing, at some point I was just kept using the language of saints and angels, and it didn't bother him a bit, because he's like, no, you're right. There needs to be a stacked structure of being. There's no way that agency is, the idea that agency stops at human agency, even from a materialist point of view, is completely ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Why would human beings be the top of agency even in a materialist system? And so it's like, no, there's agency.
And that's an incredible thing, because one of the things that we heard a lot from the new atheists is, oh, Christians used to think that the earth was the center of the universe. And it's like, no, that's not really what the earth was, sort of towards the bottom, and the only thing lower was hell. So of course you can read about this, and you know, the classical and medieval cosmology was very different, but instead of sort of having the Earth be a geocentric universe, which we sort of scoffed at, even though, again, Peugeot makes the same point as John Calvin, actually, that the creation account, John Calvin, of course, didn't have the word phenomenology, but that's essentially what John Calvin says about the creation account, that this is from the perspective of a normal, regular human being. That's exactly what John Calvin says about it. Anyway, so they're scoffing at this geocentric universe, but then what all of them do is put human agency at the absolute pinnacle of universal agency. And it's like, okay, so you're going to scoff about geology, but then you're going to put us up at the top of agency and say there's nothing above us? That's just silly. And so, you know, this is a very nested video, all the way back to Chad's video. So as we see this transformation, and as in this corner we are sort of hopping around looking for tools, and it's not just technical tools and internet tools, it's also relational tools. And you know, of course, Jonathan Peugeot and I are, if you had to boil our admonition down, it's go to church. And because church is the place that you can, you know, church is actually the right place to be working on these things. That's why Ayan Hirsch Ali is going to church, because it's the reasonable place to do it. But as a pastor, especially as a Protestant pastor, okay, well, how shall the church minister to these people? And that's the whole reason I got into this thing, back when I saw Jordan Peterson taking off and thinking, I don't know what else needs to happen, but I do know that something else needs to happen. And so I'm going to jump in, and once I get in, I'll try and figure it out. And so 6 years later, I'm still trying to figure it out. And, you know, estuary, of course, is a part of this, but I'm not about to say estuary is, you know, a panacea. No, estuary is one tool that we can use, but part of what Chad is talking about is that Chad goes to church now. I, of course, go to church. Grizz had a very interesting piece on his channel about his trip to church. which I won't play because Freddie just called and he needs a ride. So, yeah, I get the strangest life.
These conversations started to get really, really good. I'm all over the place, and so the fruitful, lush, robust, positive, meaningful conversation you could tell was floating around from kind of channel to channel. It's like this whirlwind of fascinating, stimulating conversation, and then they started the Randos United live channel, and that's started happening a lot more, and to the point where I think it almost became oversaturation, and so it became less interesting for a little while. And then Luke started doing these morning live streams, and where he can get out some of his thoughts and try and work on some of his ideas, what he's thinking about, and then he would invite people in, and these conversations have been going on maybe a month or more now, but they've been really great. Well, yesterday we were getting in this conversation about, I can't remember the title, but I brought up a couple stories. You can go and watch it. Maybe I'll put the link in there. Paul covered it this morning. And I brought up a couple stories about how things might have changed in modernity. And I guess you can hear...
And again, part of what's so beautiful about this for me is a lot of the world would look at Chad and say, he's a tile guy. He does tile. Why is he going to think about modernity? No, tile guys think about modernity. They do. I mean, I'd have Chad retile my bathroom if he lived near me. Absolutely. But he's got a lot of thoughts, and he's, and to me, part of what we're seeing is the unveiling of, I'm going to say Renaissance men, but I don't want to locate that in the Renaissance. This breaking out and then the connecting, it's just beautiful. And the new life that's forming in people. And
when I'm saying it sounds like I'm bashing modernity, or I'm saying that it is bad or that we should go back. Now, John Vervaeke has this phrase. He says, on my headstone, I wanted to say neither nostalgia nor utopia. And I can see why that is a good phrase. However, I think it's neither nostalgia nor utopia, and also this phrase. Because I think nostalgia and utopia do have their place in proper order. So in other words, the place for nostalgia and utopia are very much in the same location, which is in memory. And I think that is the proper place for utopia, because utopia means no place.
And of course, I mean, what's beautiful about this is, just to fill in the gap here, is that, of course, Chad is saying, remember, it's the member berries from South Park. Remember how it was in Bridges of Meaning? Remember how it was when Jacob first started the Just Chatting? Remember how it was? But it keeps moving. And so I've talked about Clay Rutledge before, nostalgia, how nostalgia is sort of mining the past for meaning. And it's a very powerful and important function. And Chad is basically saying, this is what I'm doing. And on one hand, I'm not stuck. And I'm not saying anybody who's doing Bridges of Meaning Discord is stuck by any means, because that has continued to evolve too. I mean, all of this continues to evolve. But you follow and you work and you change and you move.
And so those are like the best memories I have, right? And they're great. And nostalgia is like a longing for, sorry, my hand is going numb. Nostalgia is like a longing for these things. And so I think that's the proper place for it. what I was hopefully trying to get at in my talking about how things have changed is something I'm constantly trying to talk about is let's try to pay attention to the unintended consequences of progress. And what I mean by that is things get very good, very, very good. It is very easy to miss how things are slipping in other areas. And so I think there is no solution to that problem other than momentary gratitude. And gratitude is an action, I think. It's care, it's practicing care for the things that you love, and practicing care for the unintended paying attention to the unintended consequences, trying not to make things worse. And when things get real bad is when they're subtle, and it's when we're not paying attention. I do agree with a lot of what Jacob was saying, but it was a different conversation, I think.
Jacob came in the channel, was talking about the fact that he, as a child, fled Iran during the Iran-Iraq War, fled Iran. His family were Jewish. Things weren't, very good in Iran if you weren't. So that's some of the debate that they had. I covered that a bit in the video that I released today. That would be yesterday for those of you watching this on Friday morning.
My hand is falling asleep. I should probably quit smoking, huh? So that's what I wanted to say. I don't know. How do we continue to move forward and pay attention to how do we practice gratitude?
I'd say, how do we move forward to where the Spirit leads? Hopefully the Holy Spirit. How do we follow that Lamb wherever he goes? How do we do dialogos? How do we continue the conversation? 6 years we've been at this, and we did a little over here and we did a little over there, but there's still an us in here, and we're into churches, and some are trying churches, some are still sort of frustrating, sort of on the outs of churches, haven't really been able to settle, and bit by bit by bit.
And so that's what's on my mind, and I don't have much more to say, but if you all have any topics you'd like me to get on about or talk about, let me know. And
and remember, he's only got 467 subscribers, so it's a lot easier to get in touch with Chad than it is with me. It's a lot easier to get at, well, this is what he's doing.
Like this little corner of the internet thing, it's just an open bar. So come in and play. If you're a lurker, come and spend time. I mean, this is why I wanted to start doing Randos conversations. If you haven't had your story told, get a hold of me, and I'll just sit there and listen while you tell your story. And
imitation is the greater part of, is really flattery. And it was interesting when we started with the Bridges of Meaning Discord, Job was doing Randos conversations in voice chat. And I obviously can't get everybody on or through my channel. And so, again, and Chad did one with me. I posted it on my channel. Chad asked great questions that nobody else asked. This, again, is the beauty of Randos. This is the beauty of small things. And sometimes it takes time. And you know that if you're listening to, and some of you, well, some of your Randos conversations are behind but I've got about 400 of them on the regular channel. They're all in the same playlist. One guy last year or 2 years ago went through and watched them all. And I said, every time you watch one, just leave a comment so I can see, he got to that one, he got to that one, he got to that one. And Justin Wells might make a documentary out of some of them, because that's where the gold is, because the gold is in the people. And that's one of the beautiful things about how Christ plays in 10,000 places. So, yeah. So it is an open bar. find a way in. Maybe you can't get to me, but there's Friday Morning Nameless, and there's Grim Grizz, and there's Randos United, and there's the Federecci channel, and there's Grail Country, and find a corner of the corner that fits you. And there's Transfigured, and find a corner of the corner that fits you. And come out of lurkerdom and show your face. So, anyway, it's just what I wanted to say.